because
I meant that
Okay.
cross right there.
all right.
Yeah.
So
Okay, Roy.
everybody has to click got it.
Got it. You're
Yeah,
on.
I clicked that.
Did you try that?
I tried that, but all we see
didn't
now is a
see
big
you.
thing that says Zoom.
No, I guess
No,
that's
oh
not it.
no, now we're back to Yahoo. Good
Okay,
heavens.
quick, go back to where we were.
Okay, let's go back to Outlook.
I mean, they're going to start. That's
We're-
good.
Go ahead.
They're not there anymore. They're gone.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can
Okay,
hear us.
we can
Okay,
hear
good.
us.
We'll try to get back. But we'll be quiet now. You can start.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is one of my favorite stories. Love these stories. And it's part of the triple tradition. That is, it's a story that's in all the synoptic gospels in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it's a miracle story. And in fact, it's the last miracle in the book. And it does invite comparison to the first miracle. And just the context of the story, just before this story, the disciples are asking Jesus for special favors. And John reminds us that the disciples represent that part of us who, even though they see, are blind. So it really, right from the beginning, by context, we're distinguishing physical sight from spiritual sight, from the ability to see the phenomenal world in space and time versus the world of love and truth. Helen Keller, dear old Helen Keller, said it best: the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or heard or touched, but are felt in the heart. Now, the thing that happens just after this story, Jesus is on his third trip to Jerusalem, and the very next event is Palm Sunday. So here we are. We're in preparation. We're preparing for Holy Week or Passion Week, and we all know what happens that week. It's a very simple story. We have a blind beggar sitting on a road, surrounded by a crowd, and he encounters Jesus. But however simple it appears, it's a transformation. It's a miracle of wholeness. And I mean, I think we should read it the same way. We have the possibility of becoming whole, of experiencing something, learning something where our life can be transformed. And right now, tonight, I'm just going to be talking about the road and the crowd, and
If we
a
knew
little bit about Bartimaeus. But on Sunday, it's really the difference between studying something, talking about something, knowing something, versus actually experiencing an encounter with Jesus. And I'm going to try to do this in half an hour, so we have some time for discussion. And I want to spend some time on the first verse, really, because it's the point of departure. It kind of sets up the whole story. Verse 46, and I hope you have the text with you. And it's got two key words, both proper nouns, Jericho and Bartimaeus. And they're each mentioned twice. It's practically screaming out, listen, these are important words. Don't miss them. They came to Jericho as he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho. So Jericho is a famous town. It's a crossroads. There's a north-south route from the Galilee down to the Dead River and Point South. And then there's an east-west route from Philadelphia and the King's Highway to Jerusalem. So it's a commercial route, it's a trading route, it's a pilgrimage route, and it does claim to be the oldest continuously occupied city in the world. It's just it's near the river, Jordan River, where Jesus was baptized, and Herod died there. But what's the theological association? The most common association that people would have is the Battle of Jericho, which is sort of like Waterloo or Dunkirk or D-Day. It's a pivotal battle which determined the outcome of the war and the ability of the Jewish people to reclaim their land once again. And this battle was won by General Joshua. Now, the name Joshua that we read in the Old Testament, the Hebrew name is Yeshua. And the Greek word, Jesus is a translation into Greek of the word Yeshua. So they both have the same name. And this is right where people are at. This is exactly what people are looking for. They're looking for a Messiah, a general who would help them cast out the occupiers. There's just a few miles from Jericho to the west, there's a Riha. There's a Roman garrison where they have all of their troops and their weapons. So what the storyteller's doing, like any good teacher, is starting from where the students are at. They can't start from the conclusion of the story, but this is where they're at. So it just calls to mind the frame of reference that they start with in this story. Now, everything in Mark is written on two levels. One is the phenomenal level, the concrete people and places, you know, ordinary reality. And the other is metaphorical and metaphysical. They are symbols of something beyond what they normally mean. This is the spiritual level. And generally in the Bible, both in the First Testament and the Second Testament, all new things come into Israel from the east. The sun rises in the east, new wisdom comes in from the east. It's the land of beginnings and the source of spiritual wisdom. So we're set up to expect a teaching that builds on the original baptism that Jesus has in the wilderness and that will challenge the conventional wisdom that people are starting with. Now, we are introduced to Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. Bartimaeus, first of all, it's unusual for anybody to be named. It only happens a couple times in Mark that the person being healed is named, but this is a really unusual name. It's got, Timaeus is not a Jewish name, it's a Greek name, but then it's got this Hebrew prefix, bar. This is the only place in Mark where the name is explained. And it tells us Bar means son of Timaeus. Now, if you're Jewish, you don't need to be told that. You already know that. That's our language. So clearly, this is also being addressed to a Greek audience. Okay. It's a very unusual story in that it's a miracle story, but the protagonist of the story is not Jesus. We get all the information, all the action from Bartimaeus himself. He's really the hero of the story. So who is Timaeus? It is the title of a, at the time, very well-known Platonic dialogue. It's one of the last dialogues that he wrote. He wrote it at the end of life, and it's his sort of summing up of all of his teachings. It's his cosmology, the evolution of the world is toward God. We're all gradually becoming more God-like. And God is revealed in this development of the human individual. And the two main themes of this book, and I won't go into it all, I'll just say the two main themes of the book is the relationship of the higher self or the soul to the body, the lower self, under the conditions of disease or under the conditions of enlightenment or faith. That's what Plato is dealing with. Now, when we see that Bartimaeus is the son of Timaeus, it's saying this is the new improved Timaeus. This is the next generation. So we can expect, it's promising it's challenging in itself, this story, to present an even more enlightened version than Plato's version. Now, the next part of the sentence, we have a blind beggar. So this person's an expendable. He's an outcast. He's not a productive member of society. He's at the bottom. And so his condition is one of not just physical suffering, but also social isolation. And I think people who have these, especially visible handicaps, blind or lame, or anything like that, often will say that the physical condition it's inconvenient, but the more serious disability, the suffering, comes from how you're treated, how people look at you, how they talk about you. And then the even more serious disability than that is when you're treated that way over a long period of time, you start identifying with it. And so you kind of take on this attitude toward yourself. And that's a really serious disability. And this story deals with all of those things. So he's sitting by the road. Well, as I said, the road's a commercial road. It's a transportation route. But it's not just that. Symbolically, it's the way. It's the road of life. It's the Tao, the path of spiritual development itself, spiritual experience. So it's a metaphor. And Bartimaeus is finding himself on the road, but on the side of the road. He's sort of stuck. And this is his condition. And he's stuck partly because he's blind, but also partly because he's how he's treated and his own sense of disempowerment. Now, I explain all of this. I mean, this is sort of like if this were a scientific article, it'd be like, this is a review of the literature, this is where we start from. But we're not in first century Palestine anymore. And this is why I go to seminary. You don't have to learn all of that stuff. I'm supposed to bring it to you. But you still have the same problem that the people at the time, the people hearing the story had. That is, we have assumptions. We have beliefs. A lot has gone on. We have the Copernican theory of the universe and the Renaissance and Newtonian mechanics, but they are all just beliefs. And that's what we're encumbered by. So if you want to really be open and you want to say, I want my life transformed, it behooves us to do the same thing, to examine our beliefs and see, are they limiting or not? And this story starts out with the whole world. I mean, you have the Hebrew theology and you have the Greek philosophy and mythology. And of course, the Romans, I mean, most of that stuff came from the Greeks for them. And are we blind in some way? That's where we start. So, verse 47, when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, that's his point of departure. He just hears about this guy. Now, maybe he has a reputation, but something moves him. He kind of is able to see the true identity and the true possibility that Jesus represents to him by some force of intuition, by some organ of spiritual possession. Poverty usually grinds people down, but it can also be a position to look at society from a whole new perspective, and it can kind of help you develop spiritually. So when he hears that, he begins to shout. All the people say, oh yeah, shouting. Do you remember how the Battle of Jericho was won? The general, Joshua, said, be quiet, don't say anything, just sit there. And after 7 days, he said, now I'm going to tell you to shout. And you march around that city and you shout in a loud voice. And you remember this Negro spiritual, Joshua fit the battle.
The Battle of Jericho.
Jericho. and the
Yeah.
walls come
Come
tumbling down,
down.
right? Now, there's a miracle worthy of the name. I mean, those, any general will tell you it's a lot tougher to attack a city than it is to defend a city.
Mhm.
But here we have, according to the story, the wall collapsed and every man charged in and they took the city. And ever since that time, shouting is a metaphor of spiritual desire, intention, and courage. And it runs all throughout the Psalms. And what does he shout out? He shouts out, Jesus, Son of David. Now, normally, Jesus is called a lot of things like that, the Messiah or the Son of David. Son of David is just a code for Messiah, somebody who's going to rescue us. And normally Jesus will say, no, no, no. He denies that. I'm not the Son of God. I'm the Son of Man. But this is the only time I know of he doesn't do that. He says nothing. And sometimes what you don't say is just as important as what you do say. I take it as, Jesus showing respect to Bartimaeus. You know what? You're a person of faith, and I'll just let that stand. Maybe I can save you, though not in the way you imagine. But we've combined all of the big people of the whole Jewish tradition. Joshua finished up the battle that Moses started, and the son of David invokes both David and Saul. So we've got the Mount Rushmore of Jesus leaders. So a double whammy. This is exactly what the people want. Now, instead of going through every single verse, how am I doing for time? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump to verse 49. Jesus stopped and he said, call him. Now, normally when somebody needs to be healed, Jesus goes to them. He could have just as easily, even more easily, walked over to where Bartimaeus was, just as he did many times before. But he doesn't do that. In this time, he addresses the crowd. Crowd, you call him. He enlists their support. This is a key step because he's saying, you can help. I may need you to help me. It takes a community. Maybe they can't cure physical blindness, but maybe they could address the social rejection that they have going on of him, the way that they rebuke him and cast him aside. Miracles are relational. So they called to the blind man, cheer up, on your feet. He's calling you. Wow. Supportive, encouraging. What a change from where they were just a moment ago. And just like Bartimaeus heard Jesus, Jesus heard something in Bartimaeus. I mean, all the people are calling out. They're all shouting. So he's recognizing something in Bartimaeus that is worthy of stopping. So the crowd did accept Jesus's instruction. And, well, I'll just say, later on, Bartimaeus follows Jesus. It's not clear to me that his physical blindness is healed. So if he's going to be following Jesus, it's going to be through the help of the crowd. They're going to guide him or help him. So this is just kind of foreshadowing that. But this is an example of the social walls of rejection come a-tumbling down. It really harkens back to the Battle of Jericho story, but it's not about physical force and power. It's about social attitudes. This is what social boundaries. Bartimaeus throws his cloak aside. Seems like, I don't know if you noticed that or thought it was important, but he probably was not wearing his cloak. If he's a beggar, the cloak is spread out on the ground. Why? To receive alms.
Mhm.
And it's probably, I mean, it's his only heavy duty piece of clothing. It might be the only wealth that he has, but he throws it aside. And this is where he really comes out to Jesus. And there's a lot of associations with this. It's not just his protection and his shelter. It's his means for getting wealth in the future.
Sure.
He's really casting aside all that he owns. And there's another story, not very long before in Mark, where a rich man goes to see Jesus and says, "What do I need to do to get into the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus says, "Give up everything you have." And he's very disappointed and dejected and walks away. He's not willing to do it. But Bartimaeus does it spontaneously without even being told. He's quite a guy. It's also backshadowing, because to the baptism, what do you do when you get baptized in the Jordan? You take off your clothes so that you're naked before man and God. So this is in effect, he's conducting his own baptism. And he's also casting off, I'm not ashamed. I'm not taking on this social attitudes toward me. I'm casting that off. And it's a big step. It's a big step. It's also foreshadowing, because the next event is Palm Sunday. And what do people do? They take off their garments and cast them on the road for Jesus to come into town. So there's a lot going on in these short stories. But Bartimaeus is the leader. He does it before anyone else does. So Bartimaeus, he jumps to his feet and comes to Jesus. Well, how does he do that? I thought he was blind, right? Well, he's still blind, because it was in the story, he doesn't regain his sight until later. So it must be because the crowd helped. So in some ways, I think that is the real miracle of the story. It's a community miracle, not just individual. 51. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked him. Why does he ask this question? Isn't it obvious? I think it's pretty obvious to everybody. Why does he ask this question? Well, there's two reasons. Mark does it because these are exactly, word for word, what Jesus addressed to the disciples. They came to him and he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" James and John asked, well, what we really want, our heart's desire, is we would like to be sitting on your right hand and your left hand when you are in your glory. That is, when you're in heaven.
Didn't you ask?
But I don't get me. I don't know what Jesus says, you have no idea what you're asking for.
What you're asking.
Like, oh my God. Bartimaeus, these are the insiders, right? Bartimaeus, an outsider, knows exactly what he's asking for. So what we are contrasting here are these misguided and ego-based, status-oriented disciples with a poor, blind, enlightened, and faithful beggar. Right? The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. I think there's a second reason, and that is Jesus is saying, you know what, I can tell you're a man of faith, Bartimaeus, you're a man of faith, but it's very important, it's essential for you to express this faith publicly, to press it out of you. It's a very important step in spiritual development, to name it and to claim it, to testify. So again, it all comes back to us again. What would you ask for? Do you know what you're asking for? You know, what is your hopes? What do you think is your obstacle? What's your hopes? What would it take to save you? It raises that question. 7:35. Okay. I will just go back to 52. Well, it's that famous line, you've heard it many times. Go, says Jesus. He's commanding him to walk, figure out a way. That's still not clear to me that it says his sight was regained, but he tells him to walk, and he says, your faith has healed you, as he always does. You know, Jesus, there's no action that Jesus takes. There's no in Matthew and Luke, Jesus touches his eyes. You know, they've got to make Jesus do something. I mean, they really completely missed the point of the story. And really, in most of these miracles, the physical disease is not the problem so much as the subjective illness or the treatment of society and your attitude toward yourself, your identification. And the Greek word here, sojain, has healed you. It can refer to both physical healing and salvation. It refers to both physical and spiritual, which is kind of the theme of this whole story. And immediately, kaiuthus, I mean, it's in every miracle, you get to some critical point and it happens in no time at all. That is to say, it happens independently of time and space, okay, a higher dimension. So he receives his sight. Now, this is the answer to Timaeus. This is the new improved version. Plato has the idea that there's the lower self and the higher self, or there's mortal people and there's immortal people. Same idea in Buddhism is that the body dies, but the soul does not die, okay? That there's a part of us that can see beyond the phenomenal world. And the way I take these miracles is that the Christ within us is able to make contact to the Christ within Jesus. And it's that relationship, not the human one or the body or the visible one, but the spiritual intuitive relationship where the healing power is. And that's what happened. But that's what the son of Timaeus is. That's what Bartimaeus represents.
Mm.
And it says he followed Jesus. Now it's translated, I mean, I have a better translation. It's translated as if in Greek it's aorist. That is, here's the event. Now he followed. He wasn't before. But the Greek verb is imperfect, which means he was following him before, he's following him now, he'll continue to follow in the future. It's a continuing process. It's always been there. He always had this spiritual sight, but it was obscured by his treatment, his identifications, his trauma, all of these things. This is what distracts us and has put us out of touch with our divine self. And that's what's restored in this miracle. And he goes along the road. He goes along the road that could be physically, the Greek phrase, and tedodo, is he's physically going along the road, or he's going on the manner, in the style of, well, who's on the style? He's a disciple. The disciples are going along the road. Now he is too. Now, it looks like a wonderful thing, a healing miracle. Yeah, but where is that road going? Okay. Miracles are not, in some ways, they're a bed of roses, but these roses have thorns. And that's a point that it depends on your attitude of what you think healing or salvation is. It's not a bed of thornless roses. You know, there's consequences. There's things that will happen to you. It's not an easy road. And you need to know that, be careful what you wish for and what you pray for. But it's a reminder that the salvation is not just an inner possession. It's just not, our faith is not just something that we have ourselves. It has to be expressed. We have to call out, and then we have to go on the road. There's karma involved. There's action involved. And Bartimaeus does it. And that's why he's such a great hero. Okay, that's about half an hour.
That's amazing, Roy.
Wow. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can hear us, but we can't see you, but we can hear you fine.
Oh, yeah. Well, hearing is good. You're
Yes.
blind. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in these stories.
So tell me, Roy, why is this the prelude to what's happening on Sunday?
Oh, well, to understand what's at stake, the framing is a story about the expectations that people had about Jesus, and this is hoping to change their frame of reference about what freedom is all about, what being saved is all about. And so I'm hoping that on Sunday, but with this preparation, if you happen to come tonight, you're open to the idea of having the courage to go through an experiential exercise, knowing the possibility of it and the risk of it, and to examine, I mean, between now and Sunday, you could say, well, what are my assumptions? What are my beliefs? What are my obstacles? What are my blind spots? And then given that, what do I need? How can I get that removed? If a miracle could be performed, what is that miracle? What do I want? What am I asking for? Make sense?
A little bit.
A little bit.
So I need to think between now and Sunday as far as what miracle I want to happen?
When you come on Sunday, have you examined your assumptions and beliefs, and are you willing to give them up? These are part of all that this is the cloak that you wear. This is a cloak is a metaphor for your personality.
What are you willing to give up in order to?
Yeah, your cloak is what you put on before you go out the door, right?
Mhm.
But you have to be willing to give that up
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a personality.
Right. And it's not who we really are.
It's not who you really are. It's who you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's who you're comfortable with. It's how you know yourself to be, but you're capable of so much more than that.
So I'm going back to my Eshwaran, you're not your body, you're not your mind. And in meditation, you find out who you really are.
Yeah. And I would say you are not just your body. You are not just your mind. I mean, obviously, well, if you're not your body, well, who's that?
So
yeah. So, but you're not just that, but it takes openness, and you can't. Your mind can't get outside its own frame of reference, so you can't count on your mind to get you through this.
Right. So what we give up is beyond body and mind. And of course, ego is in here too, of course.
Yeah. And I can't say just give that up, and you can't just do it. All you can really do is intend to have the faith to call out and be open. If Bartimaeus could have healed himself by himself completely, well, he would have done that already. But it takes, what we do is we project, we have a power, but we've become distracted from it, or it's been obscured, but we can project it. Ironically, it's easier to see it in someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And once we see it in someone else, then we can receive it back. That's why the relationship is necessary.
Did Jesus get rid of his cloak?
Hey, you, David.
Yeah, I think he did, because he was not identified with his personality. And he would keep on asking people, who do you think I am?
Hmm.
That's a big theme in Mark, the messianic secret. What is his true identity? Which is tantamount to saying, what is your true identity?
Hmm.
In a way, it's true that we are all one, but we're unique. Also, we have our particular location in space and time. So we have a certain vantage point that has our perspective, but it's a point in a web.
Isn't that a bit scary? What are we giving up our personality for? What's the reward?
There's no guarantees. You have to have the courage and fight. You have to take a risk. It's not terror, it's terrifying. But just remember, David, it's only terror. It's only a feeling.
Oh, that makes it better. Yeah, you're right.
Good.
So we're sort of renouncing our ego in a sense to join the oneness that we all are.
Yeah, and it works a little better if you, for me, if I say that I calm down or reassure my ego. The ego's always going to be there. It's like a dog. It's loyal. It's always with you. But the problem is that it's always barking. You know? It needs a lot of attention. And,
Sure.
you just wish you could go sit, stay. But the ego was never trained,
That's right.
so it'll never just sit and stay. It'll always bark, but you, like any dog, it's okay, it's okay. You accept it, but you don't give it authority. It's the best worker and the worst manager.
So yeah.
Hmm.
So-
Notice it.
On Sunday, it'll be a guided meditation, but it's risky. You give up a lot to allow yourself to be led along using your own. I mean, you're listening to me, but you'll be using your own creative imagination to fill in all the visuals and the impressions, So it's you're using a capacity that you already always have, but we usually don't turn off all of, set aside our tasks and how we're looking and will we be judged and all of that ego stuff. It does take some courage.
Yeah, I have a question. You know Jim probably best of all of us. What would be an example of what you would see him giving up?
Is that you, John?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing about taking a risk. If I give you an example of what you would see, that's all you would see.
Okay.
I say you'd see a pink elephant. I guarantee you'll be seeing a pink elephant. You have to be a little bit tolerant of not knowing. Not knowing is the beginning.
So the metaphor for me right now is that I can't see any of you. I don't see your faces. I only can hear your voices. And I see a big screen that says Zoom in big, huge letters. So if you look at that as a metaphor, at one level, we're hearing the voices and I'm understanding a certain thing because of that, but I'm not seeing all the other stuff that really could fill out the picture. Anyway,
And if you did see it, you'd probably be quite influenced by people's
Definitely.
faces and what you thought they were thinking and all of that stuff.
Right. Can you see us?
Yes.
Oh, Marilyn's
Yeah,
peering over
I'm
it.
trying to read what it says on the top here. I'm going to click on something. I hope we don't lose you. But you don't have to stop just because I'm clicking on
I'm
something.
afraid
Okay,
we lose
all
you.
right.
That's why we don't want to.
You don't really need to see us. I mean, you've seen us.
Oh, I know. That's why I haven't tried. I've tried quite a few little things to click on, but I don't want to click on too many things that I'm afraid I'll lose the audio.
Yeah,
Latham, John brought up an interesting thing when he asked you, what do you think Jim should give up? You know, that's
Yeah,
well, let's see what John would give up instead, since he brought up the question.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
and what's the end product of me doing this for myself?
Mm.
What's in it for me to do this?
yeah,
or, you know, and another question is how do I dig in to find where the, you know, where the issue is?
Where do I start?
And that can be in a confrontation with other people or with Mary, where I find out, I get some clues. as to
yeah.
what the
You, first of all, like the thing for David is expectations are not your friend. If I give you expectations, it'll just become more obstacles. There's just no guarantees. You know, it's about you have to be open. So one of the things you have to give up, it's like where you want to, here's the metaphor, you want to begin with an empty bowl, right? But the mind can't stand an empty bowl. It's going to start filling it with anxiety and goals and expectations and conventional wisdom, blah, 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 blah. So one of the things you could do is just keep on emptying your bowl. Notice that and keep on emptying your bowl so that it's open, you know, and the bowl will be full of nothingness. That's good. That's what you want if you can get there.
Yeah, we actually talked about that this morning at meditation, I think.
Yeah.
Try to get rid of all of that stuff and get to the clear openness of not focusing on any particular thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing that can help is develop the habit of watching your mind.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. You watch your mind, you can almost literally see it picking up objects and putting them in the bowl.
Exactly.
That's what it does.
The
And just
shinier,
know,
the better.
yeah, right. But if you develop the capacity to watch your mind, it opens up the possibility of, well, who's watching?
Yes.
Mm. Mm.
You know, I think one thing that is in my bowl is a bunch of illusions, and the illusions are about things that are important for me.
Mm.
And you know, I have a note. I can make a list of, or other people could make a list of what things are important for me. You know, what seem to be important from while I operate. And a lot of those things are illusions and just holding me back from being a person, you know, of
Being your person.
yeah, and not just being some, oh, I'm you know, the problem son of my dad, you know, or something.
Polly, did you stop the recording?
No, but I can, when I post it, I will edit out whatever you want
Okay,
edited
cut that.
out.
Okay, right.
No, I'm curious here, Roy. It seems to me that what we're getting at is what you find in the dyads. You get beyond all this crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, you have to, you're emptying out. You see what arises and you express it out. It's just one technique. I mean, Buddhism has 100 of them,
Right.
techniques. But the thing, what happens is if you have this intention of, let's say, watching your mind or noticing your assumptions, if you just keep working that attention, at some point you get comfortable with that. Oh yeah, okay, I have this intention, and it just drops away. And then you really are just open and you just see things as they are.
Yep.
Is someone that's had a stroke or a brain tumor or something where things are sort of wiped out and it's a clean slate again?
There's a book about that. My Stroke of Insight.
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, we love that book.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm looking at Bartimaeus, he was sitting there begging. I mean, he was blind, and then his response was to, his life was begging. And I'm wondering, just in terms of my own self, how am I just a blind beggar? I'm just begging for stuff.
Hmm.
I'm
Well,
groveling for things from people, and
Is it expectations?
yeah, you know, and one of the things Mark is saying is it's a lot harder to be rich than it is to be poor. You know, it's not the begging that's the issue, it's the having is a bigger issue. And that it's not just having possessions, it's having things I know. I have all these things I know. I've accumulated knowledge, you know,
Attachment to all those things.
and attachment to it, and it makes you feel safe, and you can't take it with you.
yeah, well, I have all this stuff and I'm still begging for more. That's another way that I'm a beggar.
I think it's easier if you're a beggar all by yourself to do this than if you're in relationships with people,
Yeah,
know you, you've got communities that know you, and then all of a sudden you're not that same person anymore. You've given up things that people know. And I think it's easier if you don't have anything, if you are the beggar, to do that.
Yeah, well, that's why Bartimaeus, part of his obstacle was he's begging from the crowd, that is conventional wisdom. But when someone comes into view who seems a little bit further down the road than you, follow them, you know?
I know where my road's going. I don't know where his road's going.
And that's your problem. You know where it's going.
Where it's going.
Seeing that's a problem I can think of examples where some, a religious fanatic, and then gets all these people following and controlling the group. You kind of, I can't think of the names right now, but there's been religious, spiritual, what do you call it?
Yeah, a world of examples, but what's the most important is you. What is an anxiety that you actually have, not that's just possible for other people, but what do you think is in the way for you? But what are your blind spots? And if you're not sure, just ask David.
That's what I was thinking. This is getting a little bit personal, but we're among very good friends here.
Well, it's hard to say. I can't see everything.
Yeah, well, I can't, but we know who you are. But David will often say that he can't change who he is because people get very upset when he doesn't do his little, Davidism. And oh, what's the matter, David? Are you low? Are you
Right.
sad? What's the matter? Because you aren't acting like David. And he can't give up his persona because people expect him to be what David is supposed to be. But the true David, and I know the true David pretty well. My two best friends are you, David, and Roy. And
Well, that's
Yeah.
gonna change when I start giving things up.
yeah, right. Well, there you are. Well, and we enjoy your little repost there. And we appreciate it. But sometimes it really hurts, and so anyway,
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes I'm doing it because I'm hurt,
Mm.
yeah, I'm
and
sure.
it's protection for me.
I understand. Yeah.
Usually the habits aren't the issue as much as the attachment to them. It's the identification with the habit. It's the thinking, well, that's who I am.
Mm.
Well,
That-
and you can't give it up because then people won't know, people won't recognize you.
Well, you'll get pushback. Absolutely. You'll get pushback. I mean, I lived in Wisconsin and I was struck these small towns. You can be whoever you want to be. You can be goofy or, whoever you want to be, but you can't change.
Mm.
The whole town is set up. You can't change. You'll be shunned. I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to fight a whole environment.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but
Why
don't let
did
that
you
stop.
leave? you changed and left. You changed and got
Yeah, because
thin down.
the environment itself is an illusion. Their power over you is an illusion.
Yeah.
Well, I won't be in church on Sunday because I'm giving that part of my life up.
Oh, yeah, sure you are. Uh-huh. Come
We'll
on.
look for you on the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll be begging out there on Hillsdale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Roy.
Well, yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
your questions, Jim. They put me on, get me on my toes here.
No, this has been very illuminating, and yeah. It's probably good that we haven't been able to see you.
No.
I'll take that. I won't take that personally.
Right. No, because, we can, when you focus on just what the words are, you're noticing different things than if you're focusing on what people are looking like.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good observation about the power of the social environment. And it's limiting power. It's a restrictive power.
Mhm.
But if I just go off by myself, I'm out there spinning wheels and philosophizing. I mean, sometimes it's the exchange, the honest exchange is more freeing for me than just sitting in my chair imagining things.
Well, it's why I like to go for a walk with you, because I think when you're walking, you just talk more naturally, and
Yeah. Well, I think for me, reading these stories, I get I just by thinking about why is that word? Why did he ask that? That doesn't make any sense, you know? And they're just so dense. I mean, remember, these stories are written at a time. How many other books are there? People can't read anyway, and there's no TV. So they're very refined and they're very dense. Yeah. Amazing. I'm so glad. I'm so glad there's some people that will. I mean, I learned so much preparing for this, which I wouldn't have done on my own,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Helps to have an audience. Okay, so when I post this tomorrow, I will start at the beginning of your comments and then edit out the discussion part, right?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Because
yeah,
it's going to be up there on the website publicly.
yeah,
So
we said a little bit too much for people to listen to the whole.
yeah, well but that's
Sure.
what I usually do with a sermon anyway, is cut out the talk back, because I don't want to, make people
We
think,
should
oh,
have-
I got to be careful what I say because it's going up on the web here.
We
Yeah.
should have a hidden page where it's only the talkback.
Oh, yeah, that would get people coming probably.
Yeah,
If
sure.
you published a page that was only the talkback of all the sermons, and we watched that, you'd go, what? You know what? They always say the same thing over and over.
Well, that's true. We all have our own little hobby horse that we have to get out there. But to me, the discussion, I mean, your discussion, Roy, was brilliant. And I always love to hear what you have to say about scripture, because it always puts a different look at things. But I think the discussion that we've had since has been quite amazing, but it may not be very interesting to the general public, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now. Stop.